I'd like to welcome everyone both online and here in the room. I'm Heini Utunen from the World Health Organization, where I function as the lead for Learning and Capacity Development Unit, delivering World Health Organization's learning in health emergencies. And really look forward for an interesting session with colleagues across the learning areas here, and also exchange between us, the practitioners who are in the room. So in the first session, we're gonna hear from Doctors Alicia Holbrook and Anu Singh from Georgia Alpharetta. They are gonna present on virtual learning environments and those who are excelling in these spaces. So I'm handing the floor over to Dr. Alicia and Dr. Anu, and we look forward for this next 1 hour with you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I wish I was a doctor, not yet though, but my colleague Anu, she does have that PhD. She is a doctor. So thank you so much. I feel like that's a little bit of foreshadowing of my future. So I'm gonna claim that and keep working towards that. So thank you again. My name is Alicia Holbrook, and with me today is Dr. Anu Singh. I am in the Atlanta, Georgia, so the southeast part of the United States, and Anu is joining us from Noida, India. And whether you are joining us, if it's good morning, if it's good afternoon, if it's good evening, thank you so much for joining our session today. We are from a global fintech company called Fiserv. So that kind of sounds like Pfizer, the drug company. Think about it as financial services. So that's where that name comes from. Anu and I have worked together for about 5 years, and really closely for the last 2, as the world has changed. And as these changes have been taking place, we've been talking about this transition to complete and total virtual learning. The more we talked about it, the more curious we became about who, and specifically if there was a particular personality type that excelled in a virtual learning environment. And so that's what got us here today, is just, some conversations and our own questions. So we're going to share just briefly about ourselves, and then we're going to jump into the topic. So I stumbled upon my passion for teaching after a detour in working in local financial institutions. I enjoy the nuances of teaching different people, and some people come into the classroom knowing so much, others are at beginner levels, and I really like to figure out what that puzzle is to get people what they need out of our classes. I can help you and your colleagues with coaching managers and trainers on facilitation techniques that are built upon adult learning theory. So it is my pleasure now to introduce you to pass it over to my friend and my colleague, Dr. Anu Singh.
Thank you, Alicia. It has been my pleasure and privilege to find a friend in you at work and work together. Hello, everyone. I am Anu Singh, and I believe in the enormity of the human mind, its thoughts, feelings, and the social paradigm it creates and coexists in. I'm a passionate technical communicator on a mission to close the gap between experiential learning of a user on products they use for the first time through content. And I can help you connect the dots between a great product experience and a successful product adoption for customers. And now that we have shared who we are, I would like to talk a little bit about our background. Alicia, next slide, please. Alicia and I are part of the Associate and Client Performance Department at one of the industry's leading fintech companies. Client purchase our product, to use in their financial institutions, their business, and even in many sporting arenas. As client success enablers, it is our responsibility to support clients on their product adoption journey through a holistic learning process. We create a learning environment that is safe and provides our learners with the opportunity to play with our products. A large part of our learning environment is in person. Often we train a few users, they take that knowledge back to their peers and teach others. We train the trainers. So we are also involved in developing soft skills with structured opportunities such as a train the trainer program and course on feedback and less structured opportunities. For example, while we are training the products, we are also coaching the users how to find what they need when they need it through just-in-time learning. In other words, while our trainers are guiding learners through their daily tasks, they are also teaching ways to troubleshoot the uh, excuse me, product through unguided learning opportunities. This includes various guiding uh, materials, I would say, which includes quick reference cards, job aids, manuals, and a library of pre-recorded videos, all searchable for exactly what our client needs just in time. Our guided learning was, as we mentioned, in-person training. We had some web-based training and learning, but they were limited to just a few hours. Our in-person learning is anywhere from 2 to 3.5 days. Additionally, we support our clients through what we call operational reviews, where we work with our clients for up to 5 days to help them identify best practices and efficiencies. Unlike many learning and development departments, we are revenue generating, getting most of our revenues through our in-person engagements, such as the longer courses and operational reviews. Of course, in 2020, all that came to a halt, and I would ask Alicia to talk more about the unprecedented time. Alicia, over to you.
Thank you, Anu. So at first, when we all went remote, our clients wanted to simply postpone engagements because surely we would be back with each other soon. And I remember when it was first announced that half of the folks that were in our building would go home for 2 weeks, and then we would swap out. I remember thinking, oh, well, they're going to get to work from home for 2 weeks, and then everything will be back to normal. And of course, we were all wrong. And once we as a world saw that we were not returning to face-to-face environments in the near future, we started to push our clients to try more virtual learning, and more of those operational review engagements that Anu discussed. To let's just try it. So for some of our trainers, this was the first time they were training in a virtual environment. Many of our trainers only trained face to face in person with the clients. When you are training in person, of course, it's easy to see different personality types come out. It's easy to identify who's paying attention, and we could pick up on nonverbal cues. We could see, if you will, the light bulb go on for those learners who were more quiet, and that would give us a cue to say, hey, can you tell me what you're thinking? Or, give them a nod of encouragement, that sort of thing. We could use that those nonverbal cues to get those quieter learners involved without putting them on the spot, without really pushing them. Additionally, when we were in person, we could see the person who's jumping in regularly, right? And give them nonverbal cues to hang back for just a second and see if someone else has something to say. After all virtual training for some time, we also noticed attendees going oddly silent for quite some time. And they had to step away for various reasons. They were at home with their families, being not just an employee, but a parent, a teacher to their own kids, caregivers to others, you name it. It was all happening right now. Everyone needed something right now. And you would have some people who treated the call. So we would have some folks that had to step away. In other cases, we had situations where people would treat the training as an almost open dialogue. We lost that formality of a structured classroom, and so that kind of hindered the learning experience for others. So it was really interesting to see some of the differences. Virtual learning, those who did train virtually, how that had happened in the past, and this change now to where the dynamics were just completely different given COVID, given the situations that we were in. We also heard from our trainers during this time. So I'm going to share some testimonials with you. So one person shared, in an in-person training environment, it's easy to spot the introverts and extroverts by seeing their behavior from the moment they enter the room, which is so true. As I just mentioned, they're able to quickly adapt their approach and not put the quieter introverts on the spot. To keep them in a comfortable and safe learning environment. At the same time, because the trainers could so quickly pick up on the differences, they could use various engagement techniques from the get-go. However, in the web-based environment, it takes time to determine those personality types, making it a little more difficult to manage engagement in the classroom. And ultimately, the question was, how do I make sure all my learners are getting the most out of class? I'm going to share one more with you. In a web-based environment, I ask a lot of questions to ensure my learners are engaged. At first, I do not call on specific individuals, and more often than not, the question gets answered. In a typical session, it becomes clear that there are those that speak up often, those that do not. Calling on those who do not speak up can yield mixed results. Right answers, wrong answers, a follow-up question, or the dreaded silence. So for this facilitator, that started an internal monologue. Pardon me, my internal monologue starts. I probably worded the question wrong. Let me rephrase. The rephrase question is still met with silence. Again, internal monologue. Audio is working. I know they know the answers. We just discussed this. It was a simple recall question. Maybe they are an introvert and do not want to speak aloud. I have to find other ways to make sure the learner is engaged. Those types of testimonials, seeing the differences of virtual learning pre-COVID versus during COVID, in our conversations, Anu and my conversations, led us to the question, in a virtual learning environment, who excels? And specifically, how does that play into, or is there a correlation to personality types, different personality types? So, Anu, would you please discuss the various personality types?
Of course, Alicia. We all are aware of different personality types, and somewhere we get biased as well. However, each personality type, introvert, extrovert, ambivert, has its unique trait. They have their own unique traits. And I would also like to reinforce that when the environment is conducive or adverse, there is also a noticeable shift in the personality type. For example, an introvert turns into a talkative person or becomes more of an outgoing person when they meet with people who are, their personality type. people who share their passion, similar passions and interests. Similarly, an extrovert becomes quiet if they are not getting the attention or meeting people through which they draw their energy. So let me ask you your thoughts first with this question before we talk about the personality types in detail. Which personality type do you think you would excel? Uh, and use the chat feature to share what do you think, who would excel, which personality type do you think would excel, is what we are asking. Uh, Alicia, while we have our audience's response here, which personality type do you think would excel?
I thought that it would be the introvert, hands down. Maybe the ambivert. Some I didn't know a whole lot about ambiverts other than it was they could go either way. I didn't really know a lot. So my thought was the introvert because I'm not put on the spot. I may not get called on. I could just, sit back behind my computer, leverage chat, that sort of thing. My bet would be the introvert.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Let us also see what chat responses we are getting. Uh, while I share, I originally thought that ambiverts would excel with their unique abilities to exhibit a mixture of the other two personality types. And we have do we have any comments in the chat?
We do not. Is there maybe a consensus in the room of who might excel? If there are thoughts in the room, maybe the host could put them in the chat for us.
Is it probably not on? Is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. Do you hear me?
I do. Yes, thank you.
Yes, great. So currently we don't have any. I would have said it the extrovert actually. Say again? Yeah. Shall we do a poll? Hands up. Who thinks it's introvert in the room? Who would excel? Nobody? Yeah, one, two. Extrovert? Yeah, it's four of us. And the ambivert? Two. Yeah, so majority of the room here said extrovert.
Extrovert.
Yeah,
Interesting.
split between introvert and ambivert then after.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
It's like a popular choice, I would say. Thank you, Aril, for your responses. Now let's understand the personality type. Generally, introverts are known to be less social and require alone time to recharge. They shy away from groups, often preferring to be alone. They are rarely the first to speak and may not even speak unless someone directly asks them a question, something that you might have heard when Alicia was talking about some of the testimonials. Introverts are thinkers and therefore need more time. The introvert wants to collect information and formulate an opinion or viewpoint based on the information. Introverts want to share only once their idea is fully developed. In addition to formulating their own ideas and approaches, they are working to integrate the varied opinions they hear in a group discussion. This process can be exhausting. It is no wonder why they need alone time. And in a classroom environment, it is all but guaranteed they will be called upon and asked to contribute. Introverts are forced into group discussions and projects, which is their worst nightmare, second to maybe dancing in front of a crowd. However, introverts can become extroverts very quickly when discussing topics that are of interest to them. When their passions come into play, they will dive into the topic. Now, let's talk about the extroverts. Extroverts are popular, um, on the other hand, are quite social. Too much alone time leaves them feeling drained. They thrive in a settings, feeding off to the group's collective energy. In a group, formal or informal setup, they are often the first one to speak up. In a classroom where collaboration is often at the center of learning, extroverts are right at home. They can openly share their ideas and then build of other ideas on the fly. You might have observed it all yourself. Extroverts always steal the show, or our own biases come into play when we see somebody like stealing the show, we tag that personality to be an extrovert type. So now let's explore, let's understand the third personality type, ambivert. Uh, Ambivert, meaning two, are a combination of the two. They are comfortable alone and in groups. They may not seek a stage like an extrovert, but will not avoid it like an introvert at the same time. Most importantly, this can vary by mood, the situation they find themselves in, or even the people they are around. Now that we have this awareness and we know something about each personality type, let me ask you, which personality type are you? And again, you can use the chat room, and host, if you could help us with the responses we are getting in the room, that would be great. And Alicia, I'm also going to ask you, which personality type would you consider yourself to be?
I would definitely consider myself an ambivert. I'm more aligned. Some people, if you know me, or I would say know me to an extent will think that I'm an extrovert. My profession training is more apt to extroverts. However, I am very comfortable and happy alone, and really appreciate my silence at the end of the day. But for not too long. I do not seek a stage like an extrovert, but again, I don't avoid it either. I will volunteer if others are not volunteering. And so I would definitely say I'm that ambivert. It also definitely depends on my mood, and definitely depends on whether or not I feel like I have some expertise or something to contribute. How about you, Anu? Which personality type do you fall into?
I'd say you resonate. Like what you said, it felt like I'm talking about myself. So I also consider myself an ambivert, um, more aligned with the extrovert traits, I would say. Again, comfortable with the group, but I do need my me time. And I go nuts if I don't get that. Um, Not a stage seeker, of course, but when I get the spotlight, I enjoy it and I make the best use of it. So, do we know if we have anything in the chat? I am looking at the chat and would request our host if you could help us if we have any responses. Uh,
I'm gonna open the chat here to see.
I don't see anything in the chat. So what personality types do we have in the room?
So we all, by raising your hand, who considers themselves as an introvert? Melissa, four, five here. 5 introverts, extroverts, 1 ambiverts, 3. We just lost some participants.
They got put on the spot. Very good. Thank you.
Great. We are in the same pond, I would say. We have our moments. We have our interests. So, thank you for your responses and your participation. Now, Alicia, I understand you train individuals, and we talked about personality types, and we also explored the types. So, I would like to ask you to share your in-person training experience with our audience, so that we substantiate, we share more insights on our research and our reasons to pick up this topic.
Great. Will do. Thank you. Oh, let me get that slide advanced. So the introvert, of course, as we've discussed, unless they're passionate about the topic, this, of course, may play out differently, but they're going to be a little quiet. They might avoid answering questions when asked, and they even may hold their questions until a break time or lunch or something of that nature. So they're definitely sitting back. They are, oftentimes when I ask a question and I'm scanning the room to see if who's going to answer, I they look away. They're not going to make eye contact with me for sure. And and if they know the answer, they will make eye contact with me. So I can really see that going on. Now, however, as Anu mentioned, introverts, when they are passionate about topics, they'll jump in. Unfortunately, not everybody is passionate about their job or passionate about what they're learning, or even having to attend training in general. One of the things about our clients is they're oftentimes, I'm going to use air quotes, forced to come to our training because their financial institution purchased one of our products. They didn't make the choice for change, but now they're in the position where they have to adapt. But again, every once in a while we get people that are really passionate about being at training, and those introverts do become much more extroverted in nature. As you can imagine, and as it sounds like the audience is 100% with us, those extroverts are dominating the conversations, and it really becomes a situation where we're having to use those nonverbal cues. They're likely to ask questions and even talk out answers, the process and thinking out loud, and even teach back almost. And some of that might also be a little bit of a different learning style. And any extenuating circumstance, of course, can affect any personality type at any given time. The ambivert in in-person training resonates with that personality type. May not be the first person to speak up, but they will, especially in the absence of no one else speaking up, or if we've got a room that is predominantly introverts, they'll become the extroverted personality, if you will. And I find that they ask questions when they need to. There's no hesitancy in asking them. They're gonna find out what they need to find out. And so they're very active and participatory in class. Oops, I went one too far. In the virtual learning environment, what Anu and I started to think and started to explore is the idea that the introvert could hide behind the computer, they could use chat, they could see the other chats coming in. For those people who were more vocal on the call, they could hear those thoughts. They could do their processing to themselves without having the eyes of a facilitator or the eyes of others on them. Like, when are you going to talk? There was that, I'm here and I'm behind my computer and no one can see me. And so I can do my processing quietly and independently. And we also thought they would simply just, like I mentioned, leverage chat, leverage emojis, those types of things. We thought that the extrovert wouldn't get the collaboration they need. One of the great things about our learning environment is there are often people from multiple financial institutions, multiple clients in a room that don't necessarily know each other. Sometimes they might be brand new to the product. Sometimes it might be a new hire, or someone who needs refresher training. And so there's that collaboration in an in-person environment that they can say, hey, what's your best practice? Oftentimes, because we're in financial services and financial technology, the industry is highly regulated. And so we as facilitators will get questions about, how the client should, how they should comply with the regulation. And we can't answer that. However, what we can say is, Anu, how does your bank handle that? How does your financial institution handle that? And so we really thought that extroverts wouldn't get that collaboration that they needed, and that really benefited everybody. So that's how we thought there would be potential changes. So this led us to the hypothesis of I think I may be behind a slide. Oh, nope, there it went. So our hypothesis was definitely that introverts would thrive in this online learning environment, which I'm guessing the audience knows something that we did not at the time of our hypothesis given the answers that came through. So I'm going to take you through some of our research findings. It has been previously widely accepted that that extroverts thrive in an in-person class where they can share their ideas, collaborate with their peers, and introverts thrive in that virtual environment where they can reflect, as I mentioned before. They're more behind the scenes, if you will. Prior to COVID, though, we didn't see much research on long-term effects of being remote. Some companies are full-time remote, and it seems like we all had the choice. If you want to go work in an office, you may pick a company that allows you or wants you to work in that office. If you want to have a job that's remote, you can, go work for a company that has remote learning. However, COVID is proving our initial hypothesis to be false. And it's really about the long-term effects. So another contributing factor is how introverts and extroverts cope with stress. And of course, everybody is different, right? We all have different personalities and nuances in our lives. But typically speaking, introverts are more likely to withdraw as they deal with stress in more of a passive manner. Introverts also tend to focus on their emotions, which is why I always thought I was an introvert, because I would withdraw when I dealt with stress, and I tend to be more emotional than pragmatic at times. And extroverts take a different approach to dealing with stress through more active coping mechanisms and focusing more on problem solving. So by focusing on the problem rather than the resulting emotions, extroverts can better cope as they work to solve problems as they encounter situations and problems to solve. Overall, introverts just struggle more. According to a study by Edward Elmhurst Health, introverts are more susceptible to anxiety and depression. And that surprised me. Although the more that I read, I was like, well, okay, I get that. That makes sense. But I did not realize and did not think that a personality type would predispose you to some mental health, to a mental health condition. And so that I found that very, very interesting. Extroverts are still able to thrive as they're more likely to sustain positive thoughts and tend to be more resilient. So think about this. A symptom of both anxiety and depression is withdrawal. It's an extrovert's nature to reach out, to seek out the stage, to seek out interaction with people. So to me, this was almost like muscle memory. When the extrovert is starting to feel down, they're going to reach out to someone. It's what they do, whereas the introvert is going to withdraw. On top of their nature to shy away from people, many experience a stronger urge to pull away due to the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And it doesn't matter what personality type you are, these times and what we have gone through as a world in the last 2 years is enough to knock anybody enough to knock anybody over, and we're all more susceptible in this time to, to some anxiety and or depression. So it seems like it was a little bit of a double down on the introverts out there. So I would like to ask, and I feel like I may know the question, giving the predictions, but does this surprise you? Does this track with what you've seen? So thinking back, not just to what I just shared, but also what I shared about with what we see in classrooms. Does this track with what you've seen in classes? While you think about that, I'm going to go ahead and say that overall, I was surprised. Again, as I started reading more and more, everything I read was like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, okay, yes, I can see that. But at first I was like, wait, what? Like, I really just was surprised by that. Anu, was this surprising to you?
I must confess, yes, it was surprising to me. I was under the notion, rather biased, that introverts would excel. Knowing they prefer being alone, they need their time, they do things. So I believe that introverts would excel. And now that I'm reflecting and all that we have researched and discussed, um, I could also recall my experiences with the new hire I onboarded virtually during these unprecedented times. The way they navigated through challenges during their early days, um, everything, uh, all those experiences tell me a lot about their personality type. Now that we are researching and we have better understanding, we have developed a better understanding of different personality type. Um, I know them better. This is my feeling, and their communication hesitations and various personality traits that they demonstrated, their coping abilities, the way they got overwhelmed, the way they reacted to different situations. My laptop is not working, I'm not able to connect to a virtual environment, those kind of situation. um, Now that I know them, I'm meeting them in person, it's easier to make out. I have a good mix of extroverts and introverts, and extroverts actually they thrive, they cope better. So that is what I have observed, and that's what I believe now. So it indeed was surprising to me, Alicia.
Mhm. As educators and learners, it's so important to be, self-aware, to understand others with empathy. Anu, will you expand on that?
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, I'd say we need to align our approach to connect with our learners and users, knowing that people react differently to different situations. What could be an easy cakewalk could be moving a mountain for many. Um, we find it easy to say 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. People might have struggled deriving that equation and resolving that and finding therefore. Um, we also need to understand that we have this constant pi. The value of pi remains constant, but the way circumference or radius changes, it changes the entire equation. So even if the personality type remains, that very constant, situation, environment, support group, people you trust, people you have been interacting, those safety net that you get from educators, from people at the workplace or at home. It is important that we align, we understand, and we implement empathy. We feel what they are feeling. Times are changing, technology is ever evolving, and we know that we are more connected than ever before. So it is important to understand. Um, and we can go to the next slide, Alicia. I would like to continue our conversation here
Okay.
that we live in a world where communication and collaboration is key. We are more socially connected than ever before through various online platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And we are not advertising, a disclaimer, we are not advertising any of these platforms, just citing them as an example. Online platforms we have been using to interact and leverage and read, and even some of the research findings we have are the blogs we read uh, on these platforms. So at work, we rely on in-person meetings or video conferencing, collaboration sessions, instant messaging, and emails where people are accustomed to quick responses. It is easy to see why introverts would struggle. Some would even stay, I would say, some would even fall behind. So, as educators, our success lies in integrating a variety of learning approaches and delivery techniques to create a platform for learners where they can draw a sense of self esteem and take pride in how they are focusing and processing learning and all that they're out there to absorb. And this is also an area where I personally find Maslow's hierarchy of needs come into play, and it has become more relevant than ever before. We need to build that safety net for our learners where they feel safe to expose their vulnerabilities and reach out for help irrespective of their personality type to stay focused on their learning and happily pursue their learning path. The basic needs, food, that is met. The safety, they know that classroom is safe for learning. But from there, their journey of self-actualization begins, and irrespective of the personality type, the drive, the intent, the pursuit to reach that highest level of self-actualization is the key where our success lies as educators, as trainers, as mentors. And also, our success lies in going above and beyond personality types and bring in learning parity to all learners, regardless of the learning environment. This is what we have explored so far, and this is again what Alicia and I consider work in progress. So, what are your thoughts? What would you consider? What do you see, or what have you observed as our blind spots? And these are the questions I'm asking to you, audience. You can again use the chat um, to drop your thoughts. We would like to learn. We would like for you to offer your thoughts and questions. And while you take some time, or anybody in the live classroom wants to respond, I would request the host to collect their thoughts for us.
Many thanks, Alicia and Anu. Really interesting considerations you've taken in your learning programs, and this personality traits being in the information side for organizers, for learning organizers and providers is really an interesting take. I can say from my own experience in the World Health Organization, now having run the training programs during the pandemic times on COVID-19, also for our workforce in the United Nations. We haven't yet looked into the personality attributes and attendance informed by that kind of a background. But what we have witnessed over the past 2.5 years is that we've democratized the attendance to learning by online mechanisms. So we have more women, more younger people. We have people from least developed countries joining the learning programs that earlier were for the privileged. This I can say clearly as a very outstanding kind of a benefit of digitized learning formats have really equalized the access to learning events. And I think if we take anything home from this pandemic positively, it is the fact that these digitized means have really made it possible for those unusual groups, let's say in the health workforce, for instance, to join the learning journey. And this has been really a big kind of a finding for us in the World Health Organization. We have this is definitely something that we would need to in the coming years' time to look to do that kind of a personal attributes mapping among the learners. What we are tracking now in the digitized learning programs, and they are weeks long programs for professionals, we are tracking the attendance by activities. How much a person attends where, how, what type of a pattern there is for different workforce members to engage in these digitized programs. That's also very interesting. And if that could be displayed over the personality attributes like introvert, extrovert, ambivert, that would probably yield very interesting information to also provide evidence for educators like ourselves in adult education business. That's just my comment. Are there any comments from the room here or from the chat? Shall we discuss on the research side? Do you, in Pfizer area, do you think you will pursue research related to these personality traits? Or is this kind of where you are now concluding your journey over the pandemic times in isolation? Or do you have any suggestions that you are planning to take forward? Over to you, ladies.
Yeah, I would like to start with that one. For the facilitators, Anu works a lot with our technical documentation, where I work more with the facilitators and that what we refer to as guided learning, whether it's a live webinar with a facilitator or that classroom setting, whether the classroom setting is in person and virtual. I found that it exposed some lack of preparedness on our part. Well, I mentioned that some of our facilitators had never taught in a virtual environment before, and there was a little bit of panic that set in. And so we had to reassure them that there's still a trainer, that you may need to ask additional questions. You may need to call on people a little bit more. And even if you say, Anu, please feel free to answer in the chat, but here's the question. So calling on someone, but then not asking them to speak up. So from part of my job in the organization is to help other facilitators with their facilitation techniques. And so for me, I'm seeing how we need additional resources for our facilitators to adapt in these different environments. Whether it's, and yes, we are going more so back to a normal where we're doing in person again, but that doesn't mean that we have a situation where a client is saying, I'm not going to come. I'm not comfortable with travel. I'm going to stay here. What else can you offer me? And so I'm finding that we really need as a department to continue to hone skills of facilitators in that virtual environment, and then give some tips, and maybe it's not designating the actual personality type, but maybe it's designating the learner that's more quiet, the learner that is more outspoken, because some of our research is showing that just because I'm an introvert doesn't mean I'm not going to be passionate, and doesn't mean I'm not going to jump in on this topic I'm passionate about. So from that perspective, I have several takeaways of how we need to better equip our facilitators to handle that type of environment. And one of the other things that I brought up earlier is how the virtual environment at times felt like it was not as structured of a classroom, or not everyone treated it as such. So what can we do to change that? Does that mean we always turn on our cameras and we ask our participants to use their camera? What can we do to create that and establish that and keep that more formal classroom experience, so we don't come across some of the other things. So there are some definite topics that I want to explore further from that perspective. How about you, Anu?
I would add to your comments and insights, Alicia, that I'm taking care of content strategy, and with the changing times in the changing environment, we are getting our attention and focus shifted to more towards self-service, like what it's going to take for a learner, irrespective of whether they are attending a guided learning session or unguided, accessing unguided information. We are bound to make mistakes, and it is important to provide them information, predict that, understand that, empathize that they are going to make mistake, but what kind of information or the approach we need to take to help them troubleshoot or recover from those mistakes quickly. So the overall approach towards learning or training, uh, it's going to more holistic, more inclusive, would involve behavioral learning as well as cognitive learning theory. And Alicia, you can certainly add on the adult learning principles here. In addition to from that content strategy aspect, we are applying minimalism, we are applying accessibility. I foresee a future less screen, and people are reaching out instead of how to do it. It's like, Alexa, tell me how to do it. So how would a learner who is introvert would ask, that conversation design, would it need to be different for an extrovert? Hey Alexa, what's up? Tell me. So that conversation or content designing, and said, do we need to have a different approach to align with different personality type? Because we need to understand people learn differently. We need to have those omni-channel experience for our learners. So this is what I would add, that it is important to bring in that learning parity, uh, irrespective of which personality type, and be empathetic, consider what all could people think and do differently and approach differently. Yes, great conversation and wonderful insight.
We have a question from the room here. Steve, can I come and post the questions?
Hello, I'm Steve Schmidt, and just as a disclaimer, I'm presenting third in this group, and I'm presenting about a topic that you were discussing, and that is how we help instructors make transitions in their teaching style or in their teaching methods, like from face-to-face to online. And so one of the things in your conversation I thought was important is that looking at the role of the teacher here, you look at a lot of the role of the learner, but in a traditional face-to-face classroom, we expect the teacher to meet the needs of learners, regardless of whether they're introverted or extroverted. And I think that that's equally as important, the role of the teacher in drawing out the best in each student, whether that teacher is online or face-to-face. So I think that helping instructors to reach those learners online, again, we owe it to our learners to do that, because we would do that in a face-to-face class.
Exactly. Yes. And interestingly, I talked about what we refer to as practitioner levels in a session that I taught yesterday evening. And in practitioner levels is really the theory that people walk into our classroom with different knowledge levels and a different readiness to learn based on the andragogical principles, adult learning theory. And how one of the first things that you need to do is start to get to know your learners, from the get-go, and establish, what they know, what some of their background is. And so for example, asking from the get-go, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a fun fact, to create more of a collaborative atmosphere. And not that we weren't doing that in the virtual environment, but it wasn't as robust. When we were in person and someone was like, oh, there's nothing fun about me, or oh, there's nothing, not a fun factoid, we would tease and we would say, oh, you don't have like 5 puppies, or you don't have, whatever, so kind of thing. You're not obsessed with concerts. There was that banter that was so natural in person. And to your point, we've got to make sure that happens in the virtual environment from the get-go. So the expectation is set. This is collaborative. We want you to be engaged. And when it comes to, we still could do exercises virtually, and really making sure that was rich with conversation, just like we would have done if we were in person. So very good point. Thank you for emphasizing that and bringing that up.
Splendid. I think this session is soon at the hour, and as Steve said, we're going to have in half an hour time, we're going to have a session that naturally continues this discussion. So hope you can stay tuned. We really thank you, Alicia and Anu, for this great intervention, and it's been recorded, so it's there for the Learning Ideas Conference use in the future, and really congratulate you on your work and findings. It's been an interesting sharing and session with you. So thanks for this. And we'll proceed with this next session. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to all our audience here. You guys have been wonderful and great participation. So thank you. Yeah,
we should reverse the camera to show who's in the room working on the session logistics here. But really, thanks so much, and we'll transfer to the next session with colleagues from the Vienna University of Applied Sciences.
Thank you. So this is all that Alicia and I had for today.
Lovely.
Thank you for your attention and participation, everyone. Good day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Many thanks. Bye. Bye.